Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Addie and today we are doing my May wrap up, and this month I read 14 books and this was a really phenomenal reading month for me. Like, I read a lot. Usually I average around 8 books, so I read double of what I normally read, and I don't know, I really have no idea how I did it. I think I finished finals about halfway through the month and then all I did was read. So I'm very excited. I read a lot of really good books. I have a few 5 stars in here and some new favorites, and let's just get on into it. The first book that I read this month was A Funny Story by Emily Henry, and this book was one of my most anticipated reads of 2024, honestly. I love Emily Henry. She's one of my all-time favorite authors. It's not my favorite of her books, but it's still a 5-star. It follows Daphne, and her fiance had just left her for his girl best friend. The house they live in is under his name, so she has to move out, and she ends up moving with the girl best friend's ex-boyfriend, who she left for the fiance, and she moves in with him. And they basically end up fake dating to prove to their exes that they're over them and they have moved past it. What I really enjoyed about this book is that they were friends first. Like, their emotional connection was definitely flushed out before their physical. Like, it was not like an immediate attraction, which I honestly just feel is like really realistic. Also, the way she writes banter is so good. She writes it like no other. Like, I was laughing out loud. I want to talk like an Emily Henry character. That is my goal. This one is definitely more like her People We Meet on Vacation. Like, she has like some deeper reads. Like, I would say Happy Place is one, but this one definitely reads more like a romantic comedy, but it still had like its deep parts. Like, it wasn't like pure fluff, which I like. I like how there's kind of an undercurrent of like other things going on. Happy Place is still #1 for me, but this was a phenomenal read and you should definitely check it out. The next book that I read was A Perilous Undertaking by Deanna Raybourn. This is the second book in the Veronica Speedwell series. This is my favorite of the Veronica Speedwells so far, like kind of by a lot. This is what kind of made me fall in love with Veronica and Stoker and made me want to keep continuing the series. Veronica is a really good main character. Like, I really like how modern she is for her time. It's like late 1800s London, and she's very witty and very sharp, and I just love reading about her. She's hilarious, and I like how each book is its own mystery, and I liked the premise of this book a lot. The next book I read was A Tempest of Tea by Hafsa Faizal. This was unfortunately a DNF. I honestly just couldn't bring myself to care about any of the characters. There was a heist that was beginning to go on and I just could not care at all about the heist. And when I was reading it, I would space out and I couldn't focus on a page for more than like a minute. So I just decided to DNF it about 100 pages in. I usually give books about 100 pages before I give it up, but I really wanted to give it a fair chance, but I have so many books I need to read. I don't really have an issue with DNFing because, like, why waste my time on a book I'm not enjoying? But I will say, like, this particularly DNF was not because I thought the book was bad by any means. It just wasn't personally my cup of tea. Sorry, that wasn't funny. But that's not to say it wasn't for everyone. This is the author that wrote We Hunt the Flame, which is really loved in the book community, which I still want to read that as well. So if you think that this book sounds like something you enjoy, definitely give it a chance. It just wasn't personally for me. The next book I read, however, was a 5-star read, and it is Lovely War by Julie Berry. I absolutely adored this book, and I never hear it talked about. Originally, after reading this book, I had it at a 4 stars, but after reflecting more during the month and like I just couldn't stop thinking about this book, I changed it to a 5-star. The writing was flawless. The storyline was so unique. Like, I've never read anything like it. And the romances, it follows 2 romances and both of them just felt extremely timeless. The story basically follows like a lot of different views and timelines, which kind of gets confusing to explain, but once you get reading it starts to make sense. The story basically follows 2 couples from World War I and is told by the goddess of Aphrodite, and she is telling the story of these 2 couples because she considers them her best like work, and she's telling the story because she is on trial at Mount Olympus and she's trying to show like, no, like what I do is important and what I do is good, and let me prove it to you. And I feel like writing a story through the perspective of the goddess of love is extremely difficult because it has to be told beautifully, because it is literally being told by a goddess of love. And I feel like Julie Berry just nailed it. Like, it felt so, the writing style was just like romantic. And I don't know if that makes sense, but like, that's just how I felt. There was also some chapters embedded in here being told of these characters from the perspective of different gods, like Ares, who's the god of war, and then Apollo, the god of music. And I thought that was super interesting too, because the way the story was told changed based on who was telling it, which I thought was really interesting. And I feel like this book is so underrated, and if you're looking for kind of like an historical fiction with kind of like fantastical elements to it, I would definitely recommend this. This was phenomenal. The next book I read was Powerful by Lauren Roberts, and this is a novella in between Powerless and the next book, Reckless. And it tells the story of the main character's best friend Adina throughout like what she was up to during Powerless. I honestly wasn't super on board with the idea of a novella. I don't love novellas usually. I was like, I already know what happens to Adina, so I didn't really see the point. But like, I kind of knew I had to read it before Reckless because I was like, there's probably something in here that's gonna come up. However, I'm willing to admit when I was wrong, and I was dead wrong. This book literally made me cry. I cared so deeply about it after just like 200 pages, and it was very, very well fleshed out for it being a novella. I also thought the timing of this release was genius because the Reckless release was not at the forefront of my mind. I was gonna read it, but I wasn't super excited about it. And after this, I'm so excited about it. Like, I just need to know what's gonna happen next. It also set up characters that I think are gonna play a bigger role in the books to come. And yeah, I just really enjoyed it. And I think it is 100% worth the read. And then I finally finished The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I ended up rating this book 4 stars. It took me about a month and a half to get through. It's a beast. It's got 1,000 pages. I know it's a cult favorite and everyone loves the Stormlight Archives, but I just couldn't give this book 5 stars because I couldn't get through. I guess I did get through, but I was just so bored and confused for the first like 700 pages. But the last 300 pages were 5 stars, hands down. Genius. Loved them. On the edge of my seat. But I couldn't ignore those first 700. And I understand that the world building is a super complex world. This book was one big prologue basically. But that being said, I was still kind of bored. So also my other like kind of tiny issues is all I want from Brandon Sanderson is for him to write a well-written female character who's not insufferable. Is that too much to ask? Is it really? I don't think so. Because all of his main characters are great. But then there's like Shalyn, and I'm like, why is she the most annoying person on this planet? However, the world in general is genius. He's a genius. I took a little break from Cosmere stuff after this, but I'm excited to start Warbreaker and get going on that. But I've talked a lot about my feelings. I have like 5 reading blogs with this included in it, so I don't want to bore you too much with my thoughts on it. So if you want to hear more in depth, there's so many of those reading vlogs to pick from. But yeah, overall 4 stars. I am excited to start with the series though because of the last 300 pages, so I am making my way through the Cosmere bit by bit. The next book I read was Set on You by Amy Lee. This book was not for me. I did not enjoy it at all. There was no calm in comedy. The ROM was not even good. It follows this girl Crystal, and she is a fitness blogger, and at the gym she meets this guy Scott, and like she like just immediately like loathes him and like becomes like her gym nemesis. And like sure, he was kind of annoying at some points, but like why at your big age do you have a gym nemesis? Like, I'm sorry, like it just felt so immature to me. Then they both discover that his grandfather and her grandmother are getting married, so they kind of have to get along for the sake of the family. And then I did add 1 star to this because it included her fitness blog posts within, and I really enjoyed that because I did like her content. Like, it was very she's a curvy fitness influencer, so she has a lot of body positivity messages, and I just enjoyed that one of those themes of the book. However, the rest of the book really just fell flat, and I found myself rolling my eyes. I thought the character was super immature, very quick to judge and stereotype, considering that was the thing that she was trying to fight against on her platform. And it was all just very hypocritical, and I didn't love it. The next book I read is Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. This is a standalone fantasy. I ended up rating it 3 stars. 3 stars, by the way, is a good rating in my book. It's a rating that says I would recommend this book. I would recommend this. It was a really good book. It follows Elizabeth, who's a librarian apprentice, but in this world, the libraries hold magical books. But one day, her library gets attacked by one of these books, because with these magical books, they can turn into a malefict, which is when they turn evil because they get, like, the book gets damaged. She wakes up and she finds the director of the library dead and the malefict running rampant around the library, so she ends up defeating it. However, she starts to wonder later if this attack wasn't just a random accident, but part of a bigger plot, because other libraries around her, the exact same thing happening to them. So she ends up working with this guy, Nathaniel, who is a magister, who is basically just someone who uses these books. It's basically just a sorcerer. And together they work together to figure out what is really going on. I really, really love the premise. Anything with magical books has my attention. I am there, I'm sat. So I really enjoyed that aspect. I thought the world was really interesting. The main girl was so delusional the entire time. Like, it really didn't bother me though. I'm not saying that in a bad way because she's 16, so it's pretty realistic. It's kind of just what it was. And honestly, it kind of made me giggle sometimes. Like, she was just so delusional and I thought it was hilarious and relatable. Nathaniel is so sassy too. Like, he's a sassy man, and that was pretty funny too. Like, the book was kind of funny, and the only reason it wasn't a 4-star is because around the middle kind of lost me a little bit. Like, there's parts where I'm like, why should I care, you know, like, what's going on? And it was just a little slow around the middle, but it got better. The ending was great, and overall a really great premise. And yeah, if you just want, sometimes I just like a standalone fantasy romance. I feel like there's so much pressure now to like make series, and I can respect when an author's like, no, the story can be told in 400 pages, so why drag it out? And I feel like not every story needs to be a series. Sometimes I just don't want to commit to that, but I still want a fantasy, you know? So I thought that was really good for that. So if you're looking for just like a standalone fantasy romance, it is definitely a solid choice. The next book I read was Fear the Flames by Olivia Rose Darling, and I rated this 4 stars. I really, really enjoyed this book. This book follows a princess named Elwyn who is bonded to 5 dragons at birth, but her father, who is a king, is super intimidated by this, so he imprisons her and tries to break her bond with these dragons. However, when she turns 11, she escapes and she becomes the queen of this hidden kingdom, and it's like hidden by mist, and it's for people who are running from something or hiding from something. However, when she left though, she had to leave her dragons, and now she wants them back. So she partners with the commander of the army for her father's enemy kingdom, and together he's like, okay, we'll get your dragons back if you help me defeat your father. And she's like, yeah, I'll do it. Because first off, she wants her dragons back, and second off, she rules a very new kingdom and it's hidden, and she needs food. So she's like, she needs an ally. So they start to work together, and it's definitely your standard fantasy romance, but sometimes that's what I want. I just love fantasy romance. Like, I will eat it up every single time. The interesting thing about this book is that it is being re-released in September with some edits and a few different plot changes, and I really did enjoy this book, so I'm excited to reread it. But if I were to recommend a way of reading it, I would honestly just wait for the new one, because it's going to be a series and that way you don't need to read it twice. I just read it because I already had the copy and I didn't know about this re-release. If you do want this copy though, I would get it soon, because I think it's going to stop being sold once the new edition comes out. I'm really, really excited to continue on the series. I thought the romance was done very well. Like, I actually cared about it. I love dragons. The dragons was amazing. It was a really strong female main character, and also there's a big like found family element of it too, which was pretty great. And overall, yeah, a really solid read. The only reason I put down a star is because it was a little long. I felt like it didn't, some parts definitely could have been edited out, which I think will happen in the new release. So I feel like that might, we'll see if that's a 5-star, because it definitely has 5-star potential. I'm intrigued to see what she does with it. The next book that I read was Wild Love by Elsie Silver. And if you know me, you know I love Elsie Silver. She's one of probably my top 5 like favorite romance authors. I love her so much. The Chestnut Springs series is just so perfect. And this is the first book in her new series, and it follows Ford. And Ford is the brother from one of the main characters from Chestnut Springs, and he is a billionaire, but he is starting a new business in the small town where him and Rosie, the main girl, grew up. But now it's years and years later, and this girl, a 12-year-old girl, shows up on his doorstep being like, hey, you're my dad. And he's kind of navigating this, and this girl is like needs his help. And as she's navigating this, his best friend's little sister shows up back in town, who he's always had a thing for, and he can't really figure out why she's there, but he gives her a job, and she's kind of helping him navigate this too. But they definitely have kind of like a love-hate bickering relationship, and he definitely is, he's like kind of always had a thing for her. Overall, I thought this was going to be 5 stars. I just haven't really thought about it since. Like I had a lot of fun while reading it, but I just don't think it hit for me as much as like Powerless or Flawless hit for me, you know? It was still a really solid read though, and I don't love, unpopular opinion, I don't love the single dad trope. I know people eat it up, but I don't, and it's because I don't like reading about kids in books, and this was not the exception. Like, the kid definitely grew on me by the end of the book, but at the beginning I was like, so wasn't into that, but it definitely got better. I liked how Rosie and his daughter bonded, and I thought it was very organic and natural. It wasn't just like, oh, like they need to get along for the sake of the story. Like, I feel like Rosie was a really positive influence on Cora's life, and Ford is an amazing book boyfriend, love him. But yeah, overall solid romance read. Chestnut Springs Forever is still my favorite, but I'm excited to continue the series and see what she does next, because I really love this book. The next book that I read was Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. I ended up reading this 3 stars, and it was a solid thriller. It was good. It follows this woman, Laurel, whose daughter went missing when she was 15. And now it's years and years later, and she is back trying to live her life to the best of her abilities. So she starts dating again. And she meets this guy, and he has a kid, and his kid looks eerily similar to her daughter. And at first she's kind of like brushes it off like, oh, like, you know, like people look like people, it's fine. But the longer she spends with them, the stranger the similarities get, and some strange coincidences start popping up, and she's now thinking there's more to it than she originally thought. I liked how this was super fast paced. I read it on vacation. This was a definitely good like beach read. I read it in like a day. My only issue with it was that at the end, in like a thriller, I want like a plot twist. I want like the big reveal at the end, and I didn't feel like we got that. I felt like it was just kind of like, oh, we're telling a story, and which is fine. It was a good story. It was entertaining for sure, but like I kind of just wanted a little bit more out of the ending. And for me, thrillers endings is what makes the book. Like, let's be real, we're all reading thrillers. Well, we read all books to know how it ends, but like I feel like thrillers, like you are waiting and waiting just like for that shoe to drop, and I just don't feel like that happened in this book. And I feel like I've heard that's kind of how Lisa Jewell just rolls. Not to say that's a bad thing, but it just wasn't how I prefer it. But I still think this was a really solid read. The next book that I read was Guild by Riven Kennedy. This is the first book in the Plated Prisoner series, and this was I rated this 3 stars, but it was like a cautious 3. Like, I would recommend, but like I would cautiously recommend. This is a strange book. Look up trigger warnings before you read it, because I didn't, and like there's a lot of essay, and like it's not, the way that women are treated in this book is appalling, truly. The story is basically a King Midas retelling, and it follows Oren, who is the king's favored. And as the king's favored, she is gold touched, but so she is entirely made of gold. However, she is held prisoner in her golden cage. Like, it's marketed as a fantasy romance, but I don't really see, like, it's a very dark fantasy romance, which dark romances are not my thing, but I did like the fantasy elements of the book. And you don't really get to the fantasy part until like halfway through, so that's kind of where it started to like kind of get me. I was like, okay, maybe I can continue this series. All that being said, like, I don't condone any of this. I would never think this is like a solid, I would never call this a romance, because he treats her awful, and it's abusive. Like, it's so bad. It's glorified Stockholm syndrome, to be honest. However, it was entertaining as hell. It was so entertaining. I would consider this book a guilty pleasure. I didn't want to be reading it. I was like, I didn't want to be enjoying it, but it was still kind of a fun time. So cautiously would recommend. Look up trigger warnings, it's not for everyone. And the last books I read this month were The Graham Effect and The Dixon Rule by Elle Kennedy. I love these books. I'm not really in my romance era anymore, but this kind of brought me back into it. Like these were so good. And I think it's part nostalgia because I love like The Deal, like the Off-Campus series is what got me into the romance genre like years ago. And The Graham Effect follows the daughter of the characters from The Deal, Hannah and Garrett, and she's a hockey player and she is trying to make Team USA for the Olympics, but she's having some issues behind the net. So she enlists the help of Ryder because Ryder wants to be a coach at her father's training hockey camp. So she's like, hey, you help me, I'll help you. I'll give a good word in for my dad if you help me kind of up my game. I rated this one 4 stars. I'm very on the fence about 5 stars. There was just one part that kind of bugged me, but I feel like I should just look past it because I love this book so much. And I feel like parts of it are due to nostalgia. Also, what I really liked about this, it's long. It's way longer than The Deal and like the other off-campus books. I'm loving with this, actually with both of these, is it's not insta love at all. Like it's a slow burn, and I love slow burns. It wasn't like, oh, like we're both hot people, let's just be together, you know? It was very reluctant. Like they started off not liking each other, and then it was kind of like reluctant friends and then being together, which I loved so much, and I feel like it was a very natural progression. Overall, this was a phenomenal read. It was so much fun, like hearing about all the different characters from the Off-Campus series. Like I was just having the time of my life, to be honest, reading this. Like I was giggling, I was kicking my feet. It was just so much fun. I think if you like the Off-Campus series, you're definitely gonna like this one. And I'm excited because I think she said that like other children of the characters for other characters are gonna get books. I love these characters and I'm having a lot of fun. And then The Dixon Rule follows Diana, who is the best friend of Gigi, the main character of the other book, and Shane, who is Ryder's best friend. She hates him because he has been sleeping around with her cheer team. It's causing her squad to get distracted and even cause some injuries, but he has moved into her apartment building. They start a fake dating relationship because her ex-boyfriend is super persistent and she wants him to just go away, so she's hoping that if he thinks she's dating someone else, he'll just back off. And his ex-girlfriend, who he's still in love with, is back in town and he's trying to make her a little gel. This one I rated 5 stars. This was so good. The slow burn. This was a slow burn, but it was so good. And I was gonna rate it 4 stars, to be honest. It was kind of giving me the same like Graham Effect vibe where it wasn't fully, but then at the end it randomly made me cry. It was 2 a.m. I was in my room sobbing, truly, and I was like, why is the cartoon cover hockey romance making me sob right now? So I had no choice. It was out of my hands. This was getting 5 stars, and I am ecstatic for the next book. And I think there's gonna be 3 books in this series, but I know she's gonna continue like within this world in like other series, so super excited for this. You guys, if you like Off-Campus, you guys gotta read these. So this was a long video because I had a lot of books, but those are all the books that I read in the month of May. It was a super successful reading month. I'm hoping to continue that into the month of June. And if you guys have read any of these books, please let me know, and let me know your thoughts on them, and let me know your favorite book that you read in May. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this week's video. If you guys like this video, please comment, like, and subscribe. I post most Wednesdays, and there's a reading vlog every single Sunday. I hope you guys had a fabulous week, and I will see you guys soon. Bye.